This story includes distressing claims of intimidation and a reported attempt to push a child toward self-harm. No gore, no graphic detail, just what was reportedly described and why it mattered to the people living it. Msahweni is the kind of place where night arrives quietly. A few lights, a few dogs, the sense that the world goes still early. It sits near Matsamo in Eswatini, and when the wind dies down, you can hear the small sounds of ordinary life. Plates, footsteps, a door latch clicking into place. Poltergeist is an old word for an old fear, the idea of a disturbance that is not just a presence, but an active one. Knocks, thrown objects, things breaking, things moving, the house behaving like it is angry. In popular belief, the activity often seems to concentrate on one person in the home, sometimes an adolescent. In late 2024, local reporting described a family in Msahweni whose nights began to fracture into something else. The center of it was a 13-year-old boy named Jama and his mother, Jackie, trying to hold a normal life together. While the home itself turned hostile, it did not begin with a dramatic scene. It began with wrongness. A light that flickers when nothing else in the street flickers. A sound like a stone on tin. A sudden clatter in a room that should be still. The kind of moment you explain away until it happens again and again and again. The first reported pattern was stones. Not a single rock tossed by a neighbor kid, but stones described as flying without a visible source, arriving with impact, arriving with timing, arriving as if someone was aiming, yet with no one to catch, no shadow to blame. In daylight, a house is a set of rooms. At night, it becomes a map of vulnerability. You start choosing where to sit. You start choosing which window you trust. You start listening harder than you should, because the silence is no longer neutral. Reports describe lights flickering on and off for no apparent reason. That detail sounds small, almost cinematic, until you remember what it does to the brain. A flicker turns every corner into a maybe. A flicker makes you doubt your own eyes. Then the home started acting like it had hands. Pots of cooked food reportedly overturned on stable surfaces, not sliding, not wobbling, but flipping the way a person would flip them in anger, leaving the family staring at a mess that should have required a body. You can live through one odd night. You can even live through a second if the day after looks normal. What breaks you is repetition. The thing that keeps coming back teaches you that your explanations do not matter. The reported escalation is where this stops, sounding like a few weird coincidences, and starts sounding like a family being targeted. Human waste was reportedly found placed on beds, the kind of detail that is not just disgusting, but intimate, like a violation meant to shame and frighten. The house was reportedly ransacked and thrown into disarray with no sign of forced entry. If there is no obvious way in, then the mind starts inventing ways you do not want to believe. And through all of it, the reports keep circling back to Jama. In many poltergeist traditions, the disturbances are said to cluster around one person, not because that person is guilty, but because the phenomenon, whatever it is, behaves like it has chosen a focus. There is a particular cruelty to stories where a child becomes the center of the storm. Adults can leave a room and pretend to be brave. Children carry it into their bodies. They hold it in their breathing, in their appetite, in the way their eyes track the corners. One of the most specific reported events is also one of the easiest to picture. Jama's school books were reportedly snatched and thrown into a nearby river, ruining them, not just breaking property, but attacking his future, his routine, the one part of life that should have remained normal. Imagine being 13 and walking to school, knowing the house you left behind might not be the same house you return to. Imagine carrying the shame of rumors, because communities do what communities do. They talk, they guess, they choose sides. Reports also describe Jama entering trance-like states. The wording shifts depending on the retelling, but the core remains. Moments where his eyes went blank, where his manner changed, where the people closest to him felt like they were watching someone else behind his face. Some witnesses, as reported, described what they believed was unusual strength during these episodes. Then comes the moment where the haunting, at least in the reported account, tries to speak. A paper appeared with words written on it. The phrase described in summaries is Utakufa Jama, glossed as Jama will die. A flickering light is unsettling. A threat is personal. A threat tells you that whatever is happening understands the shape of your fear. And then, according to the reported account, there was a voice. Not a whisper you could dismiss as wind, but a voice that seemed to speak into the space of the home. Identifying itself with a name, Japan, and claiming a connection to northern Hoho. Japan is a name that lands strangely in Eswatini, which is part of why it sticks. It feels like a mask, or a taunt, or a misdirection. And when something chooses a name, it invites interpretation, supernatural, psychological, cultural, whatever lens the listener is already carrying. The darkest reported detail is that the voice allegedly urged Jama toward self-harm. The family felt they were dealing with something that wanted harm, not merely attention. When a family tells a story like this, people immediately ask, did anyone else see it? Did neighbors come? Did authorities come? Did the church come? Did traditional healers come? In the public retellings available online, the clearest consistent thread is the family's own reported experience, later carried into wider attention by a local newspaper report, and then repeated in summaries. That matters because it tells you what kind of story this is. It is not a case file with press conferences and forensic releases. It is a reported family ordeal that moved through local reporting and then into the wider paranormal internet. Still, even staying inside the reported details, the picture is brutal. Stones, flickering lights, food overturned, a housemaid filthy, schoolbooks destroyed, trance-like episodes, a written threat, a voice with a name. It reads like a checklist of disturbance, escalation, intimidation, and control. If you have ever lived in a home where you felt watched, you know the first thing that breaks is routine. Meals become rushed. Sleep becomes shallow. People start taking turns staying awake, not because it helps, but because it feels like doing something. The second thing that breaks is trust. When objects move, someone always wonders if a person is doing it, not because they are cruel, but because the mind needs a culprit. And if you cannot find one, the suspicion can turn inward. In poltergeist lore, one of the strangest patterns is the way phenomena can intensify when people gather. Sometimes it is said to quiet down in front of strangers. Sometimes it is said to show off. The definitions and interpretations vary, but the reported Msahweni story sits in that classic space of harassment and unpredictability that does not prove a spirit. It proves something else. It proves that the shape of the story fits a long global pattern people already recognize, which is why it spread. And yet, there is something uniquely modern about this case too, the name Japan, the way the story moved online after local reporting. If you are Jackie, you are not thinking about myth. You are thinking about breakfast, school, safety. You are thinking about how to keep your child from believing a voice that wants him gone. If you are Jama, you are trapped in the worst position possible. You are old enough to understand fear, young enough to be blamed for it. In poltergeist belief, the focused person is sometimes treated like a magnet, as if their presence invites the disturbance. That belief can isolate a child, even inside their own family. The public summaries available say the story was reported in December 2024 by the Times of Swaziland, now often referred to as Eswatini, and later repeated in online write-ups. Even if you strip away every interpretation, that date matters because it pins the story to a moment, not just a rumor floating outside time. September to December is a long stretch to live inside a threat. Weeks of waiting for the next stone, the next flicker, the next humiliation. Weeks of trying to keep a child grounded while the environment keeps insisting the rules are broken. People often ask for the one moment that convinces you. In stories like this, it is rarely one moment. It is accumulation. It is the weight of small, impossible things stacking until the ordinary explanations stop fitting cleanly. If this were a pure urban legend, it would probably end with a priest a ritual, a dramatic cleansing, a final scream, a neat conclusion. Real life does not deliver neat conclusions. Real life often ends with the family still living with it, or moving, or going quiet, or simply being exhausted into silence. That silence is part of why this case is so unsettling. The public record, at least what is widely accessible online, does not offer a clean resolution. It offers a snapshot of a family in the middle of a claimed haunting, and then the trail fades. When people hear that, they fill the gap. They decide it was a hoax. They decide it was a spirit. They decide it was a neighbor with a grudge. They decide it was stress, or illness, or attention, or something darker. The truth is that without deeper reporting or official documentation, we can only say what was reported and what remains unknown. And there is one more detail worth holding. The entity, if you believe the reported account, chose a name, Japan, and claimed a place, Northern Ho-Ho. Names are power. Names are also camouflage. If something wanted to unsettle you, it would choose a name that does not belong, because your mind will trip over it every time. If you are watching this, and you have lived through something like it, whether you call it sleep paralysis, trauma, haunting, or something you still cannot name, I want you to hear this clearly. Being afraid does not make you stupid. Being disturbed does not make you a liar. It makes you human. If you are watching and you are skeptical, that is fine too. The only line we draw is cruelty. Do not turn a real family into a target. This is where the real horror sits. Not in a demon name, not in a cinematic jump scare, in uncertainty that lasts longer than a night, and in a child who, according to the account, had to carry that uncertainty inside his own home. And if you are struggling with intrusive thoughts or self-harm urges, please talk to someone you trust or a local support service where you live. Stories like this should never push you toward the edge. They should push you toward help.